And so initially it wasn't used for depression and psychedelic, but at 1/10 of the dose, it can be psychedelic and improve depression.
Well, Andrea, it's Andrea or Andrea?
Andrea.
Andrea, I always get so confused. Like in other languages, they have all these special characters that go over the vowels.
Yeah.
So then you're able to distinguish how to pronounce that, right? And then the English language is like, I'm like, is it Suzanne or Suzanne or Suzanne? Like,
I don't really mind. I think it's pretty like Andrea, which is Spanish, and you're in Texas, so I'm fine with that. But, Andrea. Yeah.
So we're going to talk a little bit about what we're going to do with your hair today. So fill me in. What is working and what's not working with your hair? By the way, you have really nice hair.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I usually do long layers and maybe frame the face up here. I have a funny natural part that's almost down the middle. That's basically my natural part. So, I'm open to, suggestions. I blow dry my hair maybe after I shower or after I wash my hair once every 3 or 4 days. And then that's it. Sometimes when it's really humid in the summer, I will go curly. I have a bit of a wave. Yeah, my hair was maybe halfway blow dried, but so it does have a wave. So, sometimes in the summer I go a little bit shorter so it scrunches more, but it's not that curly, not as curly as you.
It's funny is that my hair, if I let it air dry, it's not as curly as this.
Okay. Yeah. If I use the right, suggestions on the right products, I like to have the flexibility to do that. But for the most part, it's just easier like this because if the next 3 or 4 days that I don't wash my hair, it doesn't look as good.
You get the longevity.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. And doing curly hair, I feel it takes, there's so many steps to it. You have to have your hair so wet and use the product and apply almost like a grotesque amount of product where you're like, this is too much, but it's the perfect amount, right? So curly hair takes a few more things to do, but we're going to do it smooth and straight since you wear it more like that. When I say straight, I don't mean flat iron. I just mean smoother.
Yeah.
I like that you're working off your natural part. I believe in working with the natural elements, so not fighting your cowlicks and, that's what's going to be the unpredictable part. So let's talk about your I like your is it too long for you?
No.
And do you wear your hair up in a ponytail?
Working out, or it's hot in the summer or something, but for the most part, no. I wear it like this, or if I'm going out, I might curl it a little bit, like big loose curls. That's pretty much it. I don't really wear it. I'm not super creative, I guess, on my wash style. I'm more of a easy, what's going to be easy and quick. I have kids and run business, those things.
Yeah, those things.
It just, the hair is maybe secondary unless I'm going out. Got an event or something.
Double checking to see what you have currently with your hair. I have some ideas. I'm going to make some suggestions.
Hey, I like that. A lot of times I don't get a lot of suggestions.
Really?
No.
Okay, cool. This is what I thought. So my suggestions were confirmed. So most of your short layering that you have is actually right here at crown. And what I was wondering to know, because I like the idea of opening up everything. Mm-hmm. If we make these short enough that you can still put into a ponytail.
Okay.
And I don't know where you put your ponytail, and that really does dictate about how short one can go. So if you wear your hair on a low ponytail, we need to make sure that these pieces in the very, very top front of your hairline are going to reach back here. If you wear it up higher, then they can go short. And I don't know how.
I don't care. I'll do it's whatever. Because I'm mostly just wearing it to pull it back to work out.
Yeah.
And so I could always put one of those little headband things around.
Don't use the ones that have the rubber grips.
No, I haven't used them in a while. But no, I'll be fine. In the workout I do is not also that big of a deal.
The rubber band ones actually have created bald spots where they I had a client. She's like, why am I losing my hair here? I'm like, oh my God, you're also losing it right here too. And then one day she came in wearing a headband and I pulled off the headband and I had these little rubber, 1 inch rubber grips so that way that it stays on, which she put it in the same spot and it just rubbed a little bald spot right in the front. So I would still be able to use those like cloth ones.
I have
6.5.
I have those for like when I wash my face, so I could just use
Those are great for working out because they actually also
absorb sweat.
exactly, which is not good for your hair.
It's weird. I actually don't sweat that much. It's like, so I can't do like my husband can run super long runs because he sweats a ton, but I don't. I get overheated.
Yeah,
It's weird.
it is weird. So I'm thinking like open this up, bring the layers a little bit higher up, and not make the layers short in the back, but work towards what you have here.
Okay.
And I think what will be nice is when you blow dry it, you're gonna have a lot more drama, as I call it, a lot more like interesting right through here.
That sounds fun.
And then it'll look great when you curl your hair, and you'll be able to also get your hair to curl. Because I think if you got your hair curly now, this part probably hangs a little bit flatter, and you have a lot more curling in the back.
Yeah.
Because it's shorter.
And also like it's a little bit more of that crinkly hair in the back, or like, like you'll see that these like
Yes,
stuff.
those are, yeah.
Little, that's curly.
Yep, I got it. I know, those are so curly. All right, so let's do this.
Okay.
Let's do this. Put your cape on, and let's do a dry haircut. I'm not opposed to wet hair cutting, but your hair is freshly clean and it's air dried. And the nice thing is I can actually see where the previous haircut, where they went through and did a lot of like softening, which you lose that when it's wet.
Okay.
And I want to make sure that we're cutting what needs to be cut off, not what I'm assuming needs to be cut off. So cool. I have my marching orders, and the reason you're here is because what you do. So can you give me like your origin story of like how is the title like therapist, psychiatrist, like what's the term that you do?
Well, I'm a therapist.
Okay.
My husband is a psychiatrist. So, I mean, I guess our origin story for Roots Behavioral Health, which is our business, is that, we met, got married. My husband said we would never have a business together. But then, we do now. So basically we started Roots in 2016, mostly because of the need in the community. My husband was working 2.5 days a week doing private practice, and then working for Travis County Jail as the psychiatrist there. And he took one insurance panel and was booked like 5 months out.
Wow.
And as a social worker, I was working in the hospital. And, when people discharge from the hospital, they need a place to go. And, there was nowhere for people to go, especially using insurance. Most people, no matter how much money you have, would like to use your insurance for your medical care.
Why not?
Yeah.
That's what you're paying in for.
Yeah. And so, access to care is, kind of a tenet for me as a social worker. And so we realized, we could expand access to care by him supervising mid-level providers, which we used physician assistants, which they're also nurse practitioners as well. So in 2016, we opened up with the intention of just having 2 or 3 physician assistants to kind of help cover the cost of the building and the rent, and, make it a reasonable business model. And then we just never slowed down because we kept taking, we take most commercial insurance. And so we've done very little marketing, or, I basically told my social worker friends like, hey, we take all these insurance and we have 2 or 3 providers, and we've been full ever since. But then and my husband I think we also do good practice. My husband is really into whole like brain, mind, body, optimizing health in that way, not just, prescribing Xanax and Prozac.
Yeah.
And so with that, we were interested in any kind of treatments that would help patients, that were struggling with treatment-resistant depression, actually, anything, but he had several patients he'd been seeing for years and nothing worked. So in 2018, we kind of heard about ketamine as by way of psychedelic. We were involved with MAPS. I don't know if you're familiar with MAPS.
No.
It's the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies or Science. Anywho, Rick Doblin runs it, and he's the one that's pushing through, or their organization is trying to push through MDMA for treatment of PTSD.
Is he English?
No, he's American.
Okay, no, because on that docu-series, Control Your Mind, I feel like
Maybe Robin Carhart Harris is a big name. Maybe that's it.
well, it was hard for me to figure out what the names were. I remember there was one guy in England,
Yeah.
and there was one guy in America who's and I think that
Oh, yeah.
it sounds like
Yeah, Rick is basically like the main guy pushing to get psychedelics off, Schedule 1. Mm-hmm.
yeah.
And he's been doing it since the 80s.
Real quick, can you explain to me what Schedule 1 is?
Yeah, Schedule 1 is basically no medicinal or therapeutic value, cannot use.
So what else is classified as a Schedule 1?
Heroin. Marijuana is also Schedule 1. Okay. So it's tricky. And so basically Schedule 1 means like if you want to, you can do research, but it's really hard to get approved. Okay. And, states have each state is different. That's why maybe certain states can have marijuana or even psilocybin, which is the active ingredient in mushrooms, legal, but they're not federally legal, right? So
that's why the pot dispensaries can't put their money in a bank.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really complicated.
It is. And I've talked to some people who do that, and I'm like, well, it sounds more of a headache.
Well, I think people truly believe, and we do too, that those can help change your mind, change the world, help people all over, So basically that organization led us to ketamine, which is a legal anesthetic. So if you've ever had any surgery, or it's one of the most commonly used anesthetics. It's actually on the World Health Organization as an essential drug. And so they use it even all over the world. So I would imagine, and so initially it wasn't used for depression and psychedelic, but at 1/10 of the dose, it can be psychedelic and improve depression. And so in 2018, we went out to California, your original state, and we went out there and trained, and our intention was to just have another option for our clients to help improve depression. And we heard about it. We did an experiential training where we also received ketamine. And we were like, this is great. And so we brought it to Austin. We were the first ones in the state of Texas to offer ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, which means not just doing an infusion of ketamine, but also doing therapy with it.
Is it, it's intravenous?
So there's several ways you can take it. We started with doing lozenges where you let it dissolve. But then at our clinic, we do either an IM injection, so just an intramuscular injection, a shot, or a intravenous IV drip.
Okay.
So we can do both. But you can actually compound ketamine into a nasal spray, that's S-ketamine or similar. And you could even compound it into a cream, like CBD kind of is. But we do injections and IV at our clinic now. And so that's where we've landed. But yeah, it helps people with treatment-resistant depression and actually a lot of mood disorders in general.
Okay, so the first thing I'm thinking of is the age that someone is I'm always thinking the most vulnerable group, right, of depression is obviously people who have a lot of probably PTSD, mm-hmm. People who are probably struggling with addiction, mm-hmm. right? I don't know much about ketamine. I'm just thinking of people I know personally
that would benefit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when I think of depression, I always think of and this is probably a sensitive subject. I'm not trying to do a gotcha question or anything like that, but a legitimate thing is there a general consensus in the industry about what is too young? Because I'm thinking you have the teenager who's 17 or 16 and they're dealing with all these pressures, which I went through and you went through when you were a teenager. Yeah. And I'm wondering in my mind, and this is just me, in my mind, I'm I would be an advocate for that because I look at how much potential greatness could come from a treatment that would be able to prevent them self-harm and self-medication.
That's a really interesting thought. We actually only work with adults, but one of the reasons they found ketamine to be effective for depression was ketamine in like warfare, like if you're in military, is given to people as it's called the buddy drug. And so you keep a vial or a shot of ketamine injection on you. So if your buddy gets, his leg blown off, you can give him a shot of ketamine so that he's not in pain.
Yeah.
And it's not like maybe the same full anesthetic dose, but they found that military people that received ketamine had less trauma from the experience than others. So it's like, how did that guy, have his leg blown off and he felt okay? It's like, well, he got an injection of ketamine in his leg. So that was one of the reasons, but also, I think they just were researching it in general. And also people getting surgeries noticed they felt better after their surgery if they had a mood disorder. So, it is interesting to think that like you could come in early on. Ketamine also, when I say treatment-resistant depression, that means like you've tried a number, I think like 3 different classes of antidepressants or mood stabilizers, that kind of thing. It's 60% effective for people that are treatment-resistant.
Okay.
And traditional antidepressants in psychiatry are 30% effective. So if you used it for your run-of-the-mill, not treatment-resistant, it's probably even more effective than 60% of the time.
It has a 60% effectiveness with individuals who are already on these mood drugs.
That mood drugs haven't worked well.
Haven't worked out. Mm-hmm. And these mood drugs like Prozac and all that are effective. Out of like 100% of people seeking treatment, the percentage that is affected by these positively or
30%.
30%. So we're dealing with like 60% of a 30% out of 100. Okay, I'm just trying to make I'm like in my head, there's like this animation of like 100 people, and then there's like 30 of these people. Yeah. And then there's only 60% of that. So like trying to visually compartmentalize what that looks like. So it's not a large group of people,
but
probably the most severely.
Yes. So that's why it's particularly amazing that it works for that population.
Yeah.
Why we don't use it as a first line for somebody coming in the first time is...
That was my next question.
Yeah. Because, you would think, well, if I just have run-of-the-mill depression, would this work? It sure could. It's fairly new and it's fairly expensive for most people. And it's kind of like the nuclear option, if you will. But we're not opposed to it. If somebody wanted to come to our clinic and do it, that's fine. But most people are like, this is my first experience with depression and, maybe I'm postpartum or something. And it's like, let's just do a little bit of Prozac and see how that works for 3 or 4 months. And then maybe you could come off of it. Our goal is also not to keep people on medicine forever.
That was going to be my next thing is, what is like the treatment on something like this? Is it a reoccurring thing?
Yeah.
Or is it like every so many weeks or months or days they have to, come visit you? Or is it like in the cases of people I know who've been through like a psilocybin treatment,
right.
like
1
or 2. And
that's what some people, people argue that maybe ketamine isn't as good as psilocybin or, LSD, those things. However, ketamine's legal and we bill insurance. So you could get for $25 if that's your copay,
You could have a much more effective treatment, which isn't.
And so it might take longer. So ketamine, it's not a one and done thing.
Okay.
So, and I think different clinics might do it differently. There's all kinds of different things that they might consider. At our clinic, if you are in with us, we're a psychiatric practice. So there might be other medicines you're trying to come off of, or, you've been with us for a while. So we think, all right, maybe let's try ketamine. And the initial intake is ideally, but most people work and have lives, is 6 to 8 sessions in 2 to 3 weeks.
That's pretty rigorous.
Yes. But most, I would honestly say that's not how most people end up coming in. Cause I have to work or I have, take time off. And each session is you're receiving the medicine for about 45 minutes to an hour. Mm-hmm. We block 2 hours. So you get a little bit of time ahead of time to to talk to your therapist, to prepare, to be ready for the experience. And this is if you're doing with the therapy. And then, while you're doing the session, the therapist can talk to you, help you keep you safe. We can talk about that more later. And then afterwards, we also talk about things. Your defenses are kind of knocked down after you've taken this. And so you can get a lot of really good, rich therapy in after receiving the ketamine as well. Before, during, and after is kind of what the therapy is. So 6 to 8 sessions in 2 to 3 weeks, or as soon as you can get them in. And then after that, everyone's what we call maintenance program is a little bit different. Okay. We'll step you down to usually like 1, then 2 weeks later for a couple weeks, and then, or maybe 2 step downs every 2 weeks, and then maybe once a month after that. And you're just coming in for your injection once a month. And then after that, everybody's different. I've had clients that are, like clockwork, and they say, I need to be here once every 4 weeks. And they just put it on the calendar, and this is their depression treatment. That's great. That's easy. They know it works. Some people, they call up, maybe 3 months later, and they're like, I need a session, or I need a maintenance, and it helps them. We do give a lot of industry to the client to kind of monitor their symptoms and know what works for them and what doesn't. Most people, we do a rating scale when people come in. That's not perfect. We do a PHQ-9, which is a depression rating scale, and a GAD-7, which is an anxiety rating scale. Okay. And so if they are showing improvement, for the first 4 or 5 sessions, we would say that their ratings were knocked down in half. Then we'll continue ketamine treatment. Now, if it's not working, like their ratings didn't go down, and they can't say it's really working themselves. Some people be like, I know my scales didn't go down, but it really is helping me. And we're like, okay, if you can tell us how that's helping, then we'll continue, because we don't want to, waste anyone's time. Yeah. And so then from there, if those rating scales were an accurate perception of what's going on for them, then we'll, what we can see when it's going up or what their symptoms were. People will say, I started to feel suicidal, so that's why I came back in. And they just need their one ketamine, every 5 weeks, 6 weeks. I would say most people probably land around every 5 weeks or so.
Like haircuts.
There you go. Yeah. I don't come every 5 weeks.
On average, like with shorter haircuts.
Yeah, for sure.
And color, like if you can get it done.
Or men go my husband goes every 3 weeks. So,
Yeah, no, I always say like 5 weeks is like the spot if you don't want anyone to ever notice any changes in your hair. Like if you want it to always be on point, 5 weeks is the spot where you're taking hardly anything off and you're coloring just a little bit.
Yeah.
But you'll always be like Anna Wintour, like just
perfect
all the time. No one will ever know.
Yeah. And so I think that's, that would probably be a good baseline for most people to manage. Some people might say, well, I need it at 4 weeks. Some people might say 6. So 5 might be a good average. I
think about this stuff because I've, over the years of having different people in my chair, I feel like there's, I really wish there would be a convention where there would be like therapists, psychiatrists, and hairdressers coming together. Mm-hmm. And because I feel like we have so much in common, mm-hmm. because it's the one few professions where people unload. Yeah. They unload. Yeah. It's their self-care. I'll encourage it as self-care. Like, go get your hair done. But like, nails. There's something about sitting and somebody touching and playing through. It feels good. It feels great. And then that like lets that. You're more vulnerable too. Like I can't, you have to share something. I mean, you don't have to. You could be rude, but it's like, well, you're cutting my hair. I don't view it as being rude. I actually view it as like, look, they just want to it's their time. Totally. And if they want to power off, put their phone down, close their eyes, and just like, if that's like their 1 hour every so many weeks to like have quiet time and like just tune out, that I respect that. That's funny. That's actually, some people will mention, once they're in maintenance, we'll say, this ketamine is just like, this is helpful for me. This is like my me time, 2 hours to, reset, recharge. So it's kind of what it is for a lot of people is when you take it the first time or the first, series, it kind of gets you onto a path of wellness and health. And so, as a therapist, we might encourage self-care, go for a walk or hang out with friends. And if you're suicidal and you want to kill yourself, that's not going to stop it.
However, if you are at like a mild to moderate depression, starting to exercise and eat healthier, all those things will actually have a pretty big impact, getting you to that next level. So ketamine's kind of a good Kickstarter.
Okay.
And so, at our clinic, we advocate for like optimizing health and wellness of the brain, getting off social media, exercising, taking supplements, those kind of things. But if you are so depressed that you were thinking of ending your life, taking fish oil probably isn't going to cut it. However, once you've had ketamine, you can start incorporating those lifestyle changes and you have a bigger impact. And so that's why it's helpful to have the therapist to help remind you like, hey, look at you. You've talked about going to work out for years and you've gone 3 times this past week and you haven't been in 2 years. And you're like, yeah, that I am doing a lot better,
I think I think people need more cheerleaders in their lives. I was talking to a client about this. We're talking about when someone takes their own lives and how it's a horrible thing, right? Like there's no getting around it. Like I've lost people to that.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes what happens, I feel like with society, tell me if I'm wrong on this, because this is like, they're all anecdotal. Like I didn't go to school for this, is that what happens is there's like this, as a society, and I think it's really become an issue because of social media, is that we have to display this perfectism. That's what I call it, perfectism, iconicism, or whatever it is. It's like we have to be flawless because we're only projecting this unflawed version of who we are, what we want our lives to be on social media. And when those people on social media are like, oh, I'm having such a bad day, and they're venting, you go through the comments like, dude, like, stop complaining. Why?
Your life is perfect.
Your life is perfect. But like for them, whatever it is, like it's a thing. And I always keep thinking about like when somebody has a bad day and they come to you, they're like, man, I just don't know anymore. People are like, oh, you're just having a moment. That they shrug it off. And like now I'm more 41 years of age. I'm now more attuned to when somebody sits in my chair or I meet somebody or friends, like, I'm just having a really hard time. I actually take it really serious.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and sometimes I wonder, like, did they have anybody to just listen?
And validate them, to hear say, you're right. That is hard. Yeah. That is a problem, because we get a lot of people saying like, well, you maybe should have spent time on me. I'm just, my problems aren't that bad. It's like your problems are your problems and they're bad. Maybe it's that you are having trouble with your wife and no, it's maybe not as bad as the next person that their child killed themselves, but it's still bad. It's still worthy of some time and energy and validation because, you're a person too.
And I think that's what will happen is like, I mean, I've seen it like a friend pouring their heart out to another friend about something. And they're like, looking like, oh, come on, that's not that bad. You know what I had to deal with? Do you know what I grew up like?
Yeah.
And then it turns into a me fest of the person. Yeah. And the person's like, I'm not in a pissing contest.
That's why having a therapist is great, because the therapist particularly will not talk about themselves because they don't want the person to feel like they have to take care of their problems, So that's why therapists are typically a little bit more reserved on their own personal information, because you wouldn't want to say like my dog died but not talk about it because, your therapist lost their dog last week too. It's like you want to be able to just talk and have your experience and your time.
When you said social media, like the first thing I thought of was like, is there more a prevalence now of depression because of social media? Like, is there like a graph?
Yeah, 100%. Yes, I don't have the data at hand, but I do believe like around 2000 when the iPhone came out, like depression rates have skyrocketed.
These are all gut emotions on my side. So like, I'm just asking you questions I really wanted to ask.
Yes.
Qualified in this.
Yes.
So I'm not crazy.
And it also increased too after the pandemic, home more and more social media. And I think the problem with social media too is just comparison, like even if you're not posting, you're seeing all of the stuff and then you're sucked into it. And then you're in a echo chamber of whatever it is.
Yeah.
Good or bad. It might be just plants, but then it's like, well, everybody knows how to make better plants, grow better plants than me, or I need to be doing more to look like them. Or these people are so wrong for not raising their plant babies right. It could be anything.
It's funny you say that because my wife recently got.
I like them. I'm into plants.
Yeah.
And for social media told me it's a millennial thing to be into plants.
Well, I think my wife hadn't always wanted to, but she was just really scared. And I don't know what it exactly was. I think she just saw some stuff and we had no plants in the house. And she's like, we need greenery.
Yes.
So I don't know if it's 100% the millennial thing. It could be. But I just also know my wife, and my wife loves learning something and she loves a good challenge. So for her to grow some of these we have right over here with this.
Yeah, I love it.
Constellation. And, these things are exotic rare plants and they're beautiful. Only reason they're alive is I don't have any interaction with them. Now, if you want the good plants, you keep them away from me. Also, if you have really well-trained dogs, keep them away from me. I will untrain them in 45 minutes.
Got it. Well, I have plants and a dog, so you're not invited.
No. Well, no, I'm fine. I'm just, don't ask them to take care of plants. I usually kill the plants because I overwater them.
Yep.
And with dogs, I don't know why they can't come up on couches at everybody's houses. I don't know why they just can't jump all over you. I'm not like that with my children, but for some reason with animals, I'm like, it's okay. They're only here for 7 years. Let them have some fun. I'm not kidding. I think that's actually how I rationalize the bad behavior. To go, they're here for 7 years. 10th lucky. Let them have fun. Let them eat the ice cream. Who cares? I was like, that's so bad. Oh, but it's fine. They're here for such a short time.
Well, I will say boundaries make people happy. And so boundaries might make your pets happy.
Even talking to my wife. I'm just going to say, she was going through the whole pack master thing,
yes,
the pack leader, and then dogs.
They like to be contained.
Yeah, and dogs, I would like to use my dogs the way a child loves a stuffed animal. Right?
Yeah, no.
And that actually makes the dog feel like they're now the leader of the pack. I had no idea of the dog psychology until I started dating my wife. And I was like, I've been doing this all wrong. It explains why my Labradors were so misbehaved.
Yeah. We have a lab, but yet he, it's on a routine, know what to expect. And he'll know what person in the house to go up to ask for food when it's time to eat. If I don't walk him in the morning, he gets a little upset, but it's they like boundaries and expectations, just like kids, you
have to give boundaries. So here's something I want to ask. From having family members who have had, my grandpa was on lithium,
mm-hmm.
and I know, there's a little bit of history on one side of my family where this seems to be a reoccurring issue, which always makes me wonder, am I feeling down or is there something more serious? And I realized it's just a collection of bad events in a row. I'm fine. I'm Mr. Optimistic.
Mm-hmm.
But I have noticed that when they're on some of these drugs, they say that they don't feel like themselves. And I had a roommate who would go off his meds,
mm-hmm.
and he'd go in these crazy manic moments.
Yeah.
And then he would get on and he felt like a zombie.
Yep.
When those people take the ketamine
mm-hmm.
treatments, what is their feedback? What's their experience of do they praise it or
right?
What is that like?
Well, that's a good question. But first, let me caveat that lithium is typically used for bipolar.
Okay.
And we can.
I don't know this. I just know my grandpa took
bipolar meaning you go from depression to mania or which we can treat bipolar depression. So you just can't be in a manic phase with ketamine.
Okay.
And so most people, I think we try to get them off of a lot of meds, but some people might still be on a small dose of something that hopefully is not perceptible in that way. I think the ketamine, when you take it, you're only feeling the effects for the time under the influence, if you would it's about 45 minutes, like I said. And then afterwards, you're maybe a little bit groggy as a hangover or, just like you just had a sedative because that's what it is.
Sure.
Yeah, coming out of it.
Yeah, it's like those long mornings where like, I just can't wake up.
Yes. So, and we don't let people drive after a treatment. So,
Assume that, but I'm glad that
yeah. Hey, so,
and turn your head towards me.
sure. So I think, how people feel, I mean, well, for one, again, I don't want to say it's for everybody and everyone has this experience, but for the people that it works for, I mean, I believe it feels miraculous for them. Like, I've heard it feels like the silverback gorilla was off my back for a moment, and what I like to say too is even if only in this 1 hour session, we gave you relief, you can then see what it's like to have that. So if you've been depressed for 10 years and you don't even know what it looks like to be not depressed, it's hard to imagine a place of not being depressed. And in that hour or that 2 hours, you're not feeling those worries, those fears, and it's like feeling lighter and lifted. And so if we can seize on that, I think that's part of like why you do several in a row. We get you to a fully functioning level. And then, you can seize on that good feeling or those positive thoughts. So, they don't feel like that because ketamine is not in your system a day later, it's basically gone.
And I mean, I just find this whole thing fascinating. Now, where do you hope the treatment of ketamine goes to?
Well, I mean,
like we're talking like more frequency, more acceptance.
Well, yeah. So when we started in 2018, we got a lot of,
if I turn up a little bit louder, I'm gonna turn this down quieter, so that way we're not,
We got a lot of flack for starting in 2018 because it was unknown. People were like, "That's scary. What are you doing?" And so, we also though think that ketamine is opening the door for psychedelics, other psychedelics that are not yet legal. So this is like a gateway in the best way possible to
best gateway.
Yes, because it's allowing us the opportunity to try how these treatments could work, like in a clinical setting. And we're also, because we're a medical office, we're reaching people that otherwise would have turned their nose up at psychedelics, saying that's, too counterculture, or I've heard really bad things. And so this is like a bridge from, your traditional medicine doctor to your, ayahuasca retreat in Peru, right? And so it's not the same, and we're not trying to pretend it's the same, but it's a step closer to these alternative treatments. So when those alternative treatments do become available, at least we've had laid the groundwork, treat people in a thoughtful, mindful way, not just saying like, okay, now it's legal and this is what you're going to do. We've had experience. So, ketamine, I don't know that that'll be like the last improvement in psychiatry, and ways to treat people, but maybe it'll be used in, more research will help us find things. But, actually that reminds me, you did ask about the addiction piece and using it for addiction.
Yeah.
Again, a lot of stuff is controversial because there's not a ton of research. There's a lot more than when we started.
Could we say there's emerging data?
There you go.
Having a couple of clients as lawyers, he started saying like there's emerging data.
Yeah.
And allegedly, that was like their favorite key was there's emerging data in this evidence. So, yeah.
Well, it has been used for addictions, and we will treat it, but not an active addiction. The ketamine isn't really effective if you have been drinking or using drugs. It's like not as potent.
So you have to be like in a sobriety state.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. But it basically what it's doing is neurogenesis, which is creating new neurons. And so if you can capture that moment or that time, you can start to think things differently, do things differently. Actually, one of my first clients, I would say he's like on the verge of alcoholism, hadn't really admitted it. But then after doing some ketamine treatments for his depression, he came back to tell me and he said, Andrea, I can't believe it. Every day after work, I come home and have a beer because I feel like I need it and I deserve it. But after ketamine, I just feel like I didn't have to have it anymore. And I was like, that's awesome. That was a side effect that we weren't necessarily trying to treat.
Yeah.
But he didn't feel that urge. So it's creating new patterns, new routines. I liken it to like an Etch-a-Sketch. If you're 41, like you said, you know, an Etch-a-Sketch is, you know, and you get those patterns and you shake it up.
Yeah.
You can still see the patterns if you didn't shake it really well.
Yeah.
And so if you're doing therapy and making lifestyle changes,
For shaking it.
you don't have to go back to those patterns. Like the ketamine shakes it up, right?
Yeah.
And so maybe it is helpful for 2 or 3 days. But if you don't do anything with that shake up, then you're not gonna get as much benefit from it. So some people, you know, maybe they can do ketamine for a while and then never come back. I mean, everyone is so different. I just would hate to say like, you're going to be doing monthly ketamine treatments for the rest of your life. I don't know that. I don't know what else is going on in your life.
Some cases it might be true. Some cases.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, I'm going to dumb it down, but it's like, I had a personal trainer because I didn't know what the hell I was doing at the gym.
Yeah.
But then after a while, I got this. And then every now and then I want to sign up and do like, $2.
Yeah, that's a perfect example.
Yeah. Like it may be years. It may be, you know, 6 weeks.
Exactly. And so it can be flexible like that. I think people that are doing therapy on their own, they can go longer for sure. Because you're making changes, making connections, learning from...
You're doing the other work.
Yes. You're not just like taking a pill or, you know, taking a shot and walking out the door. But most people, you know...
I mean, I've had clients sit in the chair and they're talking about how they're going through treatment or therapy, but you can tell that they're not doing any of the homework.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like, and then from having clients who been a therapist, and like the biggest thing they say is like, they can show up every week.
Yeah.
But
it's only 1 hour. How much am I going to help you in 1 hour, you know?
Well, okay. So have you ever watched The Sopranos?
Yes.
Okay. I never have.
Oh, why?
Because during that time when it came on, you couldn't just watch anything on demand.
Yeah.
You had to watch it from the beginning. And I was graduating in high school and like my band was playing up in LA all the time. So like I had a whole life that was way more exciting than like watching TV. So
I think we have it on DVD if you still have a DVD player.
I'm in season 6A. I made some strides.
Okay.
A month of watching 3 episodes a night. But the reason I bring this up is because there's the relationship between Tony Soprano
and this film. Yeah, it's awesome.
And the only time we actually have story arcs is when he actually does the work on himself or in his relationships with people, the boundaries, right?
Yeah.
And only then is she affected. Like if he's bringing it, he doesn't like it, he gets angry, he storms out, something happens between him and Silva or Chris, and then you see those moments and then he does the thing that she says he needs to do. And it's the hardest thing because it's like rewiring everything he knows.
Yes.
And what it sounds like is like, you know, that's like the hardest part, I think, where for some people is to look in the mirror.
So, yes.
And then, but I'm wondering, like, in those instances, those tough to reach people, would ketamine also be a possible thing?
100%.
Okay.
Ketamine, often I'm like, if I've been seeing somebody for therapy and then they do ketamine and they're like, the stuff you've been saying finally makes sense. You know, or like now I'm doing the things they know I've been saying it for years. Like, you know, maybe go to bed at a certain time for your sleep hygiene, or maybe, you know, get a new job because you're really miserable. And they do it once they've had it. Ketamine shakes it up or kind of pushes you to that next, where you need to go. And the therapy starts to maybe click or make sense. You know, I think of like, it got really odd. I think of people, you know, if you have agoraphobia where you're afraid to leave the house, you know, therapy isn't going to cut it. You're probably going to need some medication to help you get out the door to go to therapy. And then you can benefit from therapy.
Yeah.
And maybe cut back on the medicine over time, you know, but like, it's just like if somebody wants to kill themselves, just doing therapy probably isn't going to cut it.
Yeah.
They might need a medication. And then then the therapy makes sense. But like as a therapist, somebody that can't leave their house, there's only so much work I can do, you know, if they're doing that poorly. So that's why medication can be helpful. But it doesn't have to be everything. And therapy isn't everything. But some people, are just, wanting to work through life problems, and therapy's just fine.
I just feel like this is like such an amazing treatment with unrealized potential.
Yes.
And it's not like I'm thinking like, oh man, psychedelics, of course, he's a hairdresser, they love the party. I've never done anything in my life.
Oh, really?
Never. I mean, I didn't even drink alcohol until I was like almost 21.
Nice.
And that's it.
Well, good for you.
And this is the one thing that I always thought about. I'm like, I bet you if I ever needed or ever felt like I needed therapy, I think I would almost immediately want to go to the nuclear option. If I already know I don't want to acknowledge it, like, then how am I going to acknowledge it, right? Like, I already know my problem.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I hear stuff like this. I'm like, that would be like the easiest way to like smash that wall down. And then I can actually be effective stuff.
Yeah, it brings your defense mechanisms down. So your defense mechanisms being like, okay, in this room, you don't feel like telling me about your childhood trauma. You just met me, but because that's also not appropriate first time you meet somebody, really. But
I'm your therapist. Tell me about your childhood trauma.
Right. But but you're more open to saying if you've ever gotten high, or your listeners, ever gotten high, you feel like, okay, like things are a little bit more freewheeling, or like, I might say something.
Drunk.
Like,
New slips.
Right. And so when you're with your friends, you might say, oh man, I just saw my dead grandma in the room. And your friend's like, dude, that's weird. But if your therapist is there, he or she might say, I wonder why she's here. I wonder what's coming up for you. I wonder, and instead of being like, oh, that's dumb, I don't want to go there, you're looser, and you might say, well, my grandma meant a lot to me, and she died before, I had a chance to tell her that, or something, and that can be healing in that experience, whereas that is a missed opportunity without the therapy, or maybe it would have taken years for you to feel comfortable to tell me, whatever happened with your grandma, or what she did or didn't do for you,
Yeah.
because it doesn't feel safe.
My brain is like going a million miles.
There's a lot of questions to be asked. It's true. There's a lot.
What are some of the questions, or like, what would be some of the things somebody's like watching this or listening to this and they have this idea like, look, it's Schedule 1 for a reason. I just think that this is just too out there. We should just not even try this option any longer. Because I asked this to another client who was doing stem cell research.
Yeah.
Which was a far more controversial subject. And
I would say start with ketamine, because it's not a Schedule 1. It's totally safe. The safety profile, it's been used as
safe under the visit.
Well, actually, at 10 times the dose as an anesthetic, it's totally safe. So at a smaller dose, it's totally safe.
Yeah.
And so you could start there. It's not as much of a commitment. Something like a psilocybin journey is 5 to 6 hours.
Yeah.
This is an hour under the influence, 2 hour tops.
Okay.
And MDMA also 5 to 8 hours. That is also a commitment. And not that ketamine isn't a commitment, but I just think it's a nice, like I said, a gateway. It's that feels like something you need. Psychedelics aren't for everyone. I would say, under a professional supervision for all of it. If you did choose psilocybin, at least tell your doctor what you're thinking. Hopefully, our providers would help you with that, of saying like, there's certain contraindications. There might be certain medications to not take before undergoing a psychedelic experience, certain things to look out for. If you have a therapist, you might say, I'm going to go, and they don't necessarily do the journey with you, because again, it's not legal. So if you're doing it with a therapist, they're doing it, underground, if you will.
Or in a job competence university, aren't they?
Yes, right. Or in research, right?
Yeah.
But it's a little bit less.
Already getting those programs.
Yeah, it's a little less accessible.
Yeah,
watching that documentary, it sounds like you just sign right on up. Like, here at John Hopkins University, we're doing all these treatments all the time. And I'm like, man, I feel like I could just like knock on the door, like, hey, I got a hotel room for like a week.
And it's just even tricky as a researcher to get those studies approved. We actually tried to get a study approved for THC, and it never got approved.
Really?
Yeah, with veterans even, it never got approved. It's just so the Schedule I is really hard to get approved for research. But
I mean, I know people personally who have dealt with anxiety and anger management because of that. I also had a friend, I'm the same age, and I was 25, and he was 25, but 24, and he was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, right? And all the medicine they gave him for chemo was actually making him more sick, right? It's like a classic story. And his buddy, who was in this band, said, dude, I'm going to come over, I'm going to bring some marijuana, and you're finally going to eat. And my friend was like, he's like, dude, you've never touched this. And he was like me, like, I have no interest. I don't care if people do it. I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's good, whatever. But because him and I were so similar, and he was like, Tab, if you are ever in the situation I just got out, he's been in remission for years, decades. He's like, it's a miracle thing. And then he started saying, like, I think there's more miracle stuff out there.
100%. Yeah.
And I just always remember that. And so, like, with the recent topics, I mean, I have clients who are, I would call like normies, they're like super mainstream, and they're talking about these treatments.
Yes.
Because people they know are doing them.
Yes.
And they're seeing the positive change.
Well, and that's how we have to get the culture to kind of change. And I mean, back to MAPS and their efforts with MDMA, they smartly are trying to get it approved through the FDA, but also they use veterans to start with, because that's like for PTSD. And that's a population that both sides, Republicans and Democrats, can get behind. And so they're in their final stages of FDA approval. We keep being told it's going to be approved in the next couple of years or next year, but I've been being told that since 2018. So we'll see.
A long year.
Yeah, since 2018, they're like, next year it'll be approved. So here we are.
From having friends who are veterans, and hearing the amount of treatment options that are available, and then the treatment options they seek out, they desperately they don't want this. They don't want this trauma to stay with.
Oh, sure.
And if anybody's like, doesn't know what I'm talking about, or they hear about this, like, if you ever have a conversation with someone who's experienced it, it is not like, I've gotten to have 2 car accidents, and that freaked me out. Every time I come around a right turn, I'm worried for like months. I'm going to get,
you can view it.
And I call it like, I have like a horse who sees their own shadow. I freak out. And then to talk to these individuals who have far greater, I mean, this is not like one of those things. I mean, there's like everyday little sounds. Somebody drops something, and like there'll be at a supermarket. I remember one of my teachers, he was in the Vietnam War. Our middle school had a internal hallway. So you didn't go to class on the outside, you went from the inside, and something triggered him. And he ran into the class and had an episode where he thought he was back in war. And I remember I was in 7th grade watching this. So, those are those areas of, I think, your years, those formative years, these things really stick with you. And I just keep thinking, like, okay, it's like, oh, well, how bad can it be? And I'm like, well, if you talk to these people, if you have friends who have severe depression, like you want them to be alive. I'm wondering if these treatments were more available and more positive and light, if I have a few more friends alive today.
Oh, sure. We wish that people knew about access to certain things or had the ability. That's part of why we take insurance as well. It's like giving access to the regular person, not just elite people that know about it and, circles with money or things like that. So again, we're trying to introduce it in a way that is palatable to the masses, if you will. But another thing just to mention, since we did mention THC, I don't know if you're aware, and I don't necessarily want to drum up a ton of business, but we can prescribe THC in Texas for PTSD
Really?
and autism spectrum disorder. And now just recently, I think pain. So we've been prescribing THC for a year and a half.
Okay.
And it only in tincture and dummy.
Okay.
But that is very helpful. Again, anecdotally, just never got approved for the study.
Yeah.
That's what we were trying to study with, trying to set up that research with the dispensary, but it never got approved. But anecdotally, it really helps people with PTSD taking a small amount of THC. It's not like a huge dose, but the idea is that, when you think about the brain, the amygdala is that fight or flight freeze.
The reptilian brain.
Mm-hmm. And it's somebody with PTSD that is like constantly on guard. That's why they're so quick to respond to, something that sounds like a gunshot. Well, THC can kind of lessen the intensity of that, or like kind of calm it down.
So it turns the volume down. So instead of it being like at 11, like Spinal Tap, it's like at a 5.
Right. And so I'm better able to function and get through my day and not be like constantly worried or anxious. That's really good. Yes, I do.
Cool. So what I was thinking is like, you can pull your hair up and you can have like this kind of little pieces that kind of like come down. It's nice. And then, you have nice long layers.
Yep. Looks great.
You didn't want anything wild. I thought like, why not just do something very classic, very like iconically beautiful. There's nothing, we're not doing anything crazy. You didn't suggest anything that, I want some shaved bits and I want a mohawk or anything like that. Just want classic, beautiful, pretty hair. And it's actually some of my favorite hair to do, just beautiful hair.
Thank you.
I just want to say thank you, Andrea, for like coming in and talking about this.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
I want to dive more into this stuff because I think this is great. So if you enjoy this haircut and want to do like a round 2, like by all means, I know you don't go every 6 weeks, you can go a couple months.
Yes.
So I'm pretty sure there'll be like new data, new cool stuff talking about.
Or we could dive in a little deeper in a couple months or whatever, because this is like pretty like scratching the surface, and there's so many questions. I mean, when we go to a mixed company, that's like we could get cornered and talk for an hour or something on this type of topics.
Oh, I can imagine, but I just wanted to kind of get like an idea because after watching that docu-series on Netflix, Change Your Mind, it was like the first episode is LSD, then it goes psilocybin, and then it goes MDMA, and then mescaline. And then I was surprised it stopped at 4, and it didn't talk about, I was surprised ketamine was the only reason I think it got mixed is because it is approved for that. Because Michael Pollan typically uses things that are plant-based, like he's going, and that's like a bit, some people say, well, it's not plant-based, but fun fact. I love both facts. Both MDMA and ketamine, one of the chemical compounds is derived from a plant. Okay. So, but it's not technically like psilocybin, which is fully plant, right? Or THC, or mescaline. So, it is derived somewhere from a plant. If you look at the chemical compound, I think it's because it's more of a manufactured medicine than Michael Pollan, is a botanist by trade. And so he focuses on plant-based stuff, but it is like it's very similar. I mean, I didn't know he was a botanist or any of that stuff. Like when I went to go watch it, I was just like, all right, I want to hear all the things about psychedelics because from having friends, I have friends in the rock and roll, right? So you're there. I'm around stuff. And I have always had people say, one person in particular who's sober, and he did tell me, he goes, if there's anything you're ever going to do, I go, what? He goes, do psychedelics. And I was like, why? He's like, you come out a better person. And that was his words, not mine. I've never done this up. I mean, he was talking about DMT, which I don't know anything about that. It sounds crazy. And he was talking about how he had done, I think he did ketamine, and then he had done psilocybin. And he was saying that in each one of those instances, he came out feeling like more relieved. And I thought it was interesting for someone who has sobriety to not be advocating, but just to basically be like, not all these things are equal. Yeah. And actually psychedelics aren't considered a drug that causes addiction. They're not addictive. That was my assumption. But again, you could, because I've never met anybody who's like, oh, I had to go to the Before Center because I just couldn't stop LSD. Yeah, no. Another thing is, how does it work with somebody who maybe is having depression, because I'm thinking of personal stuff of friends of mine. They reached out to these substances for their depression. They get sober. The depression is not there. How does that work with like an NAAA setting? Is it considered still you're taking a drug?
That's a good question. I don't know.
I will, you know what I'll do? I'll have to find someone who's in that world and ask them that.
Because, are they allowed to take antidepressants?
I don't know.
I think they are. I believe you are allowed to take it kind of depends maybe on your
Sponsor.
Yeah.
In your workshop.
But I do believe you're allowed to take other medicines and so if you consider it as an antidepressant, then I would imagine you would be able to do that. But I would ask an expert.
I need to get Dr. Drew on. That's what I need to do. I need to Drew.
What do you think?
What do you think? You're Dr. Drew. You would know this. So
I bet it's probably okay for some people, not for everybody.
One individual case. Much probably like the treatment plan for cancer and depression and all that.
Because anything can be abused,
My intake of coffee some people may say it's a slightly abusive of the espresso bean. So, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I enjoyed this. I learned a lot.
Oh, good. I'm glad. And I got a great haircut.
You got a great haircut. So we both won. This is awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Bye.